Welcome back to Vital Signs, where we are tackling a very challenging topic, sexual abuse in children. And we have Kerry David here, who has her upcoming film, Open Secret, that really exposes some of this. And we've been talking, Kerry, a lot about sexual abuse and what does it look like and how can we kind of see if someone's being groomed, or what are our red flags. But one of the biggest questions that I got from viewers of your previous segment were, how do I broach this topic? How do I educate my children on what sexual abuse even is in an age-appropriate way?
Yeah, well, that is part of why we're making this film, so that there will be a tool which you can actually play this film for your family and then have the conversation. But of course, that's the cart before the horse because the film isn't finished yet. But I wanted to introduce, we briefly discussed off camera about churches and venues where that you can actually ask one of your community leaders to come in and have a sermon and to address this, because the less taboo this subject becomes, the more approachable it will be for you. And as uncomfortable as sexual assault is to discuss with your child, it is going to be far more uncomfortable if your child becomes a victim of sexual assault. And I think that's something to put in the back of your head. And if I could just quickly touch on something about signs to notice, maybe your child is spending too much time with an adult, and listen, for us, it was a school district, but 90% of children who are molested know their molester and the predator. And so it could be a family member that is spending too much time with your child. And so there are signs that are obvious to look out for that aren't just you getting there with your magnifying glass going, oh, what's going on with my son or my daughter? It's like, just be aware of who they are spending time with. So yeah, if I could just throw that in there, I think that's important too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, a big conversation or a big topic that I got was, I'm really uncomfortable bringing this forward. And maybe I'm even uncomfortable going. You suggested going to our community leaders, but if I'm uncomfortable as a parent talking about this, how do I overcome that discomfort so I can open that topic, whether it's with my child, and I think we talked in the break a little bit about gamification, so I'd love to hear about that, or
Sure.
it is approaching another adult who might be a community leader.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of resources, and it depends if you're a mum or a dad. I think mums are perhaps more communicative with each other, and maybe you are uncomfortable, but some mums in a community environment that you could say, hey, can we get together as women and talk about this? The same with men. Can we get together as men and talk about this? Because no man or woman want their mum or dad want their child to be a victim of sexual abuse. And so it's about overcoming our own distaste. And as you said much earlier, no one wants to look at this, but look at the repercussions of not looking at it. Your child becomes a victim. So I think if you file that away, there are definitely a lot of online communities that you can find. I mean, even going to Reddit, and going online, and there are amazing organizations like RAINN, which is RAINN, that have a lot of tools. And as you had again mentioned earlier, when the film comes out, we are putting together a resource on our website, and we will put up there therapists that you can speak to and lawyers that you can speak to, and successfully those lawyers who've actually successfully closed litigation against multiple institutions. And so there are places that you can go and have that conversation before you bring it to your child. And I think it's also a really good point to think you actually want to get comfortable talking about it before you speak to your child, because the last thing you want to do is to bring your uncomfortability to that conversation, which is going to be a difficult and challenging conversation anyway. So I think there are actually a lot of resources where you don't have to do it alone. That's the key of it. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, you absolutely did. You don't have to do it alone. And I think the moral of the story is we need to get comfortable as adults having this conversation. We need to take it from underneath the rug and look at it. And yeah, it's ugly. And yes, we don't want to think that people will do some of these things. But the reality is we have a responsibility as parents and as community leaders to protect our children. And it takes a community to raise a child, and so it's really important that we get involved. So Kerry, the next question I'm going to ask you is, your film is due to come out. I know it's not quite complete yet. Can you share with us, how can we follow the progress? How can we learn more about this? If we want to bring this into our community for a community showing or whatnot, what might that look like? How can we reach out to you about this film?
That's a great question. Thank you for that. So we have three places where you can go and see us. We have our website, which is opensecretthefilm.com. And we also have wefunder.com/open secret, which I have to say right now, I am updating that more than any other site. And then on that site, you can become an investor. But then we also have a third site, which you can access through our website, which is if just for donations, if you just want to donate to what we're doing and support us that way. So all three have a version of where we are. But as I say, right now we are, yes, the wefunder.com/open secret. That's where we are updating most right now. But I will touch on something else. Through this process, I've met some incredible people who have been on a similar journey, but not in the school environment. One of them was an attorney who settled a case against the Catholic Church for $1.2 billion, and he's done a couple since then, actually. But he and I had an intense conversation about how there's a playbook of how predators act. You know, they seem to be where the children are. The grooming is the same. And so I'm actually filming him at the end of January. He's flying out to us to be filmed, to be a part of this, because we want to show that it isn't just this small environment at school or similar where your child can be at risk. And that if you start knowing the signs from his perspective and what he has seen, and our perspective and the people in our film, what they have seen, together you'll start to get a general idea of like, oh, okay, I see how this works. And then you can protect your children far, far better than you would without having known that. And one thing I wanted to say about one of my investors, his wife is a pastor in a church, and she actually does give sermons about child abuse prevention, sexual abuse prevention. And when we were speaking, she knew about the parents being groomed and she knew about the child being groomed. She didn't know that the community also gets groomed. And I said, unfortunately, that is where the victim blaming seems to come in. They set it up so well that when that time comes, and it could be years and years that they've been a predator before it actually comes up, that the community will usually back the predator because he's such a great guy, you know, or she's such a great girl. More rare, but it does happen.
You know, it's really kind of frightening once you open this and discover that it's been a years-long process. It's some of the people who have positioned themselves in such a way that there is that victim blaming and shaming. And I want to kind of ask one question of more before we conclude, because if we as adults see somebody or suspect that there is sexual abuse going on, it's frowned upon to be a whistleblower. There's fear of retaliation. So what are the steps if we're an adult and we suspect this is happening to our child, or if we're an adult and we suspect it's a colleague that's doing this? What is the advice that you have for that person?
Again, this is such a complicated answer. Sorry, it's a complicated question because it depends on how old is the child? What are the circumstances? Is it a family member? Is it at school? Is it at church? I mean, there are so many variables that it could play into. But the first thing you do is you take that child away from that person, because whether it ends up being true or false, that child needs to be protected. So whoever you suspect, first make your child safe, right? And you take the child aside. Again, depending on how old the child is, how verbal they are, have the conversation. Does this person make you uncomfortable? I've noticed things that make me uncomfortable. Can we talk about that? If it's egregious, if it is so overt and you're like, oh, this person did this thing, because of the situation that we have documented, I would actually say go around the institution and go straight to the police. In fact, what actually got this whole ball rolling, which is extraordinary and is in its extreme result that you have to do it, somebody went to the district attorney, and then the district attorney called in the FBI investigation, and this whole thing blew up. Hopefully you won't have to go to the district attorney, but if you can make your child safe, first of all, and keep them away from that person, that is something I would push home. And again, if it's somebody that you know, then you can say, listen, I'm uncomfortable with you touching my child in any manner. Right now, can you just refrain from physically touching my child? You're not accusing anyone of sexual assault. You're saying, I don't want you to touch my child. And again, we touched on this before, you and I. Giving your child agency to protect their body is about the best gift you can give somebody in this situation. And that is, gamify it. Come home, have a game with your child and say, listen, we're going to play a game. I'm going to be somebody that you do not want to touch your body. And I'm going to come at you. I'm going to touch you anywhere. It doesn't matter, on your arm, on your shoulder. And you are going to scream as loud as you can that you don't want me to do that. I want you to scare me. And the reason that I think that this is a really good tool to practice is, of course, in real life, if somebody did touch them in a way that made them uncomfortable, they wouldn't scream at the decibel level you're encouraging them in this conversation, but they would have the confidence to shout, "Get off me," or stay away from me. And it would be enough for an adult who had ill intentions to stop, because they do not want to be noticed in the grooming process. Because when it comes to the abuse itself, that's done in secrecy. But there are steps that these predators take in mainstream before they can get to that place, and you want to stop them there so that your child doesn't become a victim of that. Is that helpful?
Absolutely. I love the gamification. I love getting with our child and playing this game so that they get comfortable, because I was in athletics and sports medicine, and we rely on our highest level of training. So if our kids are used to that reaction, it's more comfortable. They will actually be vocal about it when if something negative were to occur. Thank you so much, Kerry, for your expertise. Unfortunately, we are at the end of our show, but folks, I want you to definitely reach out to Kerry. Check out opensecretthefilm.com. That's her website. Thank you for your expertise, Kerry. I really appreciate you today.
Jen, thank you for having me on your show again. It's been a pleasure. Really appreciate you.
Yes, and you, I want you to take this to heart. Today is the day. Kerry gave us some very good action steps. Today is the day to start having an open conversation with our children about what is okay and what isn't. Let's start setting that boundary. Let's start having those open dinner time conversations with our children to normalize asking about their day, so that if something was out of the ordinary, they would feel comfortable coming to us as a safe space. Without further ado, we do have to end this show, but the good news is we'll be here same time, same station next week. Until then, have an amazing rest of your day.
This has been a Now Media Networks feature presentation. All rights reserved.